Welcome back into Locked On Sports Atlanta, free on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Search Locked On Sports Atlanta. Again, give us a follow on Twitter at Locked On ATL. I'm at Mark Zinno, MarkZinno. And let's dive right into it here because the Falcons have completed their rookie mini camp. And here to talk to about that and a whole lot more from Locked On Falcons, it's our good friend Aaron Freeman joining the show. Aaron, welcome and great to have you back here, bro.
Appreciate you having me on, Mark.
All right, rookie mini camp wraps up. I mean, nothing too amazing really happens at any of these things. You know, you get through it with no injuries. I think that's the most important part. But try to take something away from what we saw. Was there anything you could find? Any sort of needles you could pull out of a haystack?
I mean, if you were looking for Desmond Ridder to get off to a good start, and say all the right things, and and the highlight clips look good throwing, those half-speed out patterns against air. I think you saw that, and so he checked that box from that standpoint. I think the one thing that most people agreed on is Desmond Ridder has sort of that professional approach and that intangible quality that you think makes him a professional quarterback from the neck up, and he displayed that. And so if you're looking for camp competition at that quarterback position, if you're looking for Desmond Ridder to at least sound like a franchise quarterback, I think he checked that box.
How much competition do you think we'll see between Ritter and Mariota in camp?
I think it's Mariota's job to lose. I do think, though, that Ridder has an opportunity because I don't think the expectations are high for this football team that he can come in and outright win the job. So I think it's going to be a legit competition, but I don't think people should assume that it's going to be neck and neck going into training camp. I think really those first couple of weeks, and then we get into the preseason stuff, and I think there's a possibility that Ridder could come in and take the job, but I don't think that's kind of the plan for the Falcons. So, if I was to sit here and put numbers on it, I'd probably say like 70-30 in favor of Mariota being the starter week one.
I don't know if you heard me. I talked about it on the show a couple of times, but the best place to insert Mariota into the starting lineup, honestly, is week 8 against Carolina. Now, typically, you'd love to do it post the mini bye after the Thursday night game or post bye week, but those are the Falcons happen in week 11 and week 14. So you're probably too deep into the season at that point to really gauge what he has and what he doesn't. But if you bring him in week 8 against Carolina, you get that meat grinder at the front end of your schedule out where you get, the defending Super Bowl champs. Obviously you got the Saints. You're going to get the Bengals there as well. So you're getting a whole bunch of tough, the Chargers are going to get a whole bunch of, no, you don't get the Chargers yet. You're going to get a whole bunch of tough opponents. But if you insert him in week 8, in that game against the Panthers, 1, it's home. 2, you're probably getting one of the worst defenses on your schedule that you're going to play, at least statistically from last year. So he won't face a ton of pressure or immediate rush. 3, here's the rub. After being home for that game, they are home for the following week against the Chargers. Then they play the Panthers again on Thursday night in Carolina. And the big thing is, honestly, you'll get a gauge in 10 days how much he's learned from the first time he saw an opponent to the second time. It's not often you get to see the same opponent twice in a 3-week span in the NFL. It's happened before, but it doesn't happen with any regularity. So if you're asking me, probably after a best of 2-5 start, maybe 1-6, I don't predict wins, but it kind of feels that way, that's a distinct possibility. It's just time to make a change because it's time to make a change at this point. There's no reason to keep running Mariota out there with no different results. Bring the kid in, let him start in week 8 against Carolina.
I agree with you, Mark. And, that's a rare occurrence between us. So I have no notes. I agree 100%. I was saying similar things on Locked On Falcons when the schedule came out. It seems like the schedule makers built in a plan for a path for the Falcons to, throw Mariota out there, throw him to the Wolves in the early part of the season. And then when the schedule starts to get a little bit softer around the midpoint, at that point in time, assuming the Falcons aren't, 4-3 or whatever the case may be, which I don't think they will be, you can turn the page to Desmond Ridder and basically give him the second half of the season in a pretty relatively, compared to the first part of the season, an easy path to sort of acclimate to the NFL.
Aaron, we don't need to talk about the Falcons' deficiencies straight out. We know they're all there. That said, it does beg the question why Arthur Smith is trying to put a basketball team on a football field when he plays offense. I mean, I get it. Look, they're going to be 3-step drops, very short routes to bigger wide receivers. You look at the size of the wide receiving core that they have. They might not be the fastest. They might not have the best hands. They might not be the best route runners, but they're going to be bigger than most of the guys they're matching up with defensively. So I foresee a dink and dunk offense trying to annoy the hell out of you until you make an adjustment, because they're not going to have enough time to do 5 and 7 7-step drops on the regular. So big bodies, wide catch radius, a lot of room for a fairly inaccurate quarterback by today's standards to have room to get the football, to me, seems like what they're trying to do.
Yeah, it's fascinating because when Arthur Smith came to Atlanta, he said he was going to make adjustments to his offense to fit the personnel here in Atlanta. And it seems like, by all accounts, he's just basically building the same version of the offense that Tennessee had. And he's really not making that many adjustments. And that's not meant to be a knock, but it is just notable to me that when you look at the two Titans wide receivers that he was had in his offense, and A.J. Brown and Corey Davis, they were bigger wide receivers. They were a bigger combination of wide receivers. And it seems like with Drake London, with Kyle Pitts, and the additions of guys like Brian Edwards and Auden Tate and Geronimo Allison, that they're basically hoping that, through the power of competition, one of those guys emerges, whether if Drake London's supposed to be the A.J. Brown, then one of those guys emerges to be the Corey Davis, or vice versa, or whatever the case may be. And so that seems to be the plan for the Falcons right now. We'll see if it works. I think that's the style of wide receivers that you want to have, particularly if you want to be a run heavy team like the Titans were, where you're running the ball a lot to Derrick Henry. And, you want bigger wideouts that can, get on the edge and block for that running back and open those big runs. I don't know if the Falcons quite have that type of player in the backfield, but certainly I think with all the additions that they made at the wide receiver position, that they're working towards some sort of semblance of a very Titans-esque offense in the future.
Well, you heard it here first. Tyler Algier starting running back week 1. I don't know that there's another option. It's not Cordero Patterson. He's not going to be a bell cow back on first and second down. He'll obviously get run there, but that's not going to be what Arthur Smith had anything remotely close to. And I'm not even talking about the size of back of Derrick Henry. That's not anything with the level of consistency that a Derrick Henry could produce. So I think Algier is closer to that. Kadri Allison, Damian, why is his name slipping my mind here? Williams might get a little bit of run. But I think week 1, Tyler Algier is a starting running back for this team.
I think the Falcons are definitely putting their bets on Tyler Algier to be that guy. And I know plenty of people that are draft people that really like Tyler Algier, had him as one of the top 4 or 5 backs in this draft class. I didn't quite see him on that level, but clearly the Falcons seem to be leaning in that direction where they think probably they got a steal, moving on from Mike Davis and having Cordero Patterson and doing the various things that he's going to do. I do think Patterson is going to be the lead tailback, but I do think, as similar to the conversation we're having with Desmond Ridder, I do think the conversation is going to lead to the Falcons wanting to transition to Tyler Algier to be potentially their bell cow back, so that they can utilize Patterson's skill set more in the passing game where he's at his best.
And I think that's it. I mean, he's going to be the fastest wide receiver pass catcher that they have. He's the only guy out there who really can stretch the field past the defense. And so I think that that's the role that he'll start to assume a little bit more on the offense, is to be, while they're dinking and dunking, is to try to find him going deep one-on-one and outrunning a defender. And then you leave it up to Marcus Mariota to actually get the ball out there where it's catchable. So that's a whole different equation. But at least the execution of the premise isn't bad.
Yeah, and you look at talking about getting rid of the ball quickly, like last year, Patterson was the one guy that you could dump the ball off to, and he could turn a 5-yard pass into a 20-yard gain. And so he still remains their best asset in terms of that moving forward. So I think, Patterson will have his role more as a pass catcher this year. I think the goal is to have Algier be more of the bell cow running back, and we'll see if he can live up to those expectations. We know rookie running backs have had a history of coming in and having success. I think the big question for me with Tyler Algier is not necessarily his ability, but who's blocking for him. That to me was the real issue for the Falcons last year, not the running backs. And so I think running back the same potential starting 5 this year, we'll just sort of have to see if those guys are better at this in year 2 under Arthur Smith and offensive line coach Dwayne Leverett than they were in year 1. Because if we get a repeat of what we saw last year, then this running game is going nowhere.
Aaron, while I certainly can at least understand the direction of the offense, I don't have to agree with it, but I can understand it and think that the execution could work to try to cover up some of the deficiencies. I don't know if I have the same sort of confidence in the defensive side of the ball. I'm not sure what they're doing or what they're trying to build or what direction they want to go in. I mean, based off the draft picks alone, obviously they got an edge rusher, they got a middle linebacker, they got a couple of guys on the D line, but they didn't do any major upgrades to the secondary or change anything around from that standpoint. So what is the plan for the defense in your opinion?
I think they want to see, particularly in the secondary, where certain players go, particularly at the safety position. I think Richie Grant and Jalen Hawkins didn't necessarily do a ton last year, but Hawkins flashed some playmaking ability with some interceptions. Richie Grant was kind of square pegged due to the injuries at the nickel cornerback position and playing a lot more cornerback than safety. And so I think the Falcons giving him a year at safety to sort of win that job now that Isaiah Oliver's back handling a nickel cornerback spot. I think the Falcons are just looking to see sort of if they have any pieces in the young pieces. I think my main concern with the defense is up front. They couldn't rush the quarterback. They couldn't stop the run last year. They gave up, I think, 720 yards rushing in the final 4 games of the season, which is without a doubt, one of the worst things I've ever seen. And they didn't really do anything. They did draft a couple of pass rushers, but they didn't really do anything to beef up their defensive line. And I wonder if maybe we're, on the eve of training camp, there'll be a move made to get maybe another veteran in here because I look at their schedule and I see a whole lot of teams that are going to run the football. And if the Falcons run defense can't stop the run any better than they were a year ago, they're just going to get completely grinded down by, some of these teams like Cleveland, Arizona, Pittsburgh, some of these other teams out there that are just going to run the football. Carolina really pounded it down their throat. New Orleans as well in that Week 18 game. So I think that's going to be the concern. And obviously you need to get pressure on the quarterback because, Tampa Bay is not going to run the football. They're just going to drop back and throw the ball 50 times to Tom Brady. And we've seen him light up this defense. And so you need to be able to get pressure on the quarterback in those games. But I think those are the big question marks. But I think right now for the Falcons, it's kind of just a piecemeal. And that probably will be something that they will invest heavily in next offseason to sort of supplement it. But this year, you're just kind of hoping that some of these young players like Richie Grant, as well as some of the rookies, can step up and show that they have a future here in Atlanta.
Yeah, well, that run stopping thing, Jordan Davis was pretty good at, but we don't need to revisit the NFL draft at all. He is Aaron Freeman. Again, check him out on Locked On Falcons, free on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. You can search for Locked On Falcons. He's part of our Locked On Atlanta network here. Aaron, thanks so much for the time. We'll have plenty of time to dissect this throughout the entire summer, so I'm sure we'll do this again real soon. But thanks for the time as always. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, brother. All right, well, we will take a time out and wrap things up next here on A to Z on Locked On Sports Atlanta, free on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Search Locked On Sports Atlanta.